Well, hello there. Welcome to Existential Sunday. Good morning. It's Sunday morning. If you're watching this in the morning, if you're watching it later on the replay, good evening or good afternoon, whatever it is where you are. My name is Corey. If we've not met, I'm a husband, a father, a podcaster, and I am, I guess, the host or speaker of this very thing you're watching now, which is Existential Sunday. So welcome to all of you who are watching later. Welcome to all of you who are watching live. Good morning. I'll come by later in the comments on Facebook, not so much on YouTube, but in the comments on Facebook, I'll come back by and give you a fist bump and a high five and say what's up to you. But thank you all for being here this morning. I appreciate you joining. This is a space, I say it every week, and I just want to say it again because I think there's always new people watching. This is a space for anybody watching this who is a person who is willing to engage in conversation, or I guess in this case, listening to, but engaging in the comments, certainly on Facebook, in dialogue about deconstructing and decolonizing our faith, our ideas, our worldview. This is not a space where I am attempting to deliver something to you and expecting you just to buy into all of it. That's not my intention. And today, especially, like, I have some things to process out loud. I said that weird. Some things to process out loud that, like, you know, I'm not sure I have this thing wrestled to the ground yet. But it's important enough to discuss because it's, you know, it's a part of what's going on in our world. And I think it's important, as I get going here and get started and get to the point here in a second, I think it's important that we all give ourselves permission and normalize being doing the best we can with the information that we have in front of us, but while also being open-handed to the notion that the information that we have or the resources we have access to are not the entirety of the story. There is a part of the story that every one of you watching this has that I don't, and vice versa. And so I think that it's important that I say that. And I'm about to talk about some things that run the risk of certainly upsetting some folks. I probably should say it every week, but this week in particular, because I was sitting here thinking about something that I've been wrestling with, and asking myself the following questions. I literally just asked myself, Corey, why don't you trust the outrage, or not even just the outrage? Why don't I trust the collective sensibilities, morals, social movement of evangelicals? Like, why is it that when I see boycott Netflix, something inside me just starts to boil like I got stock in Netflix, which I don't? Here, let me say this too before I get any further. This is what I find a little bit ironic about this whole boycott Netflix thing, is that there are so many people who don't even have a Netflix account, right? Talking about canceling Netflix. You're borrowing somebody's Netflix. Like, you have the password to somebody else's. So most of you can't boycott Netflix. You're just going to stop using your parents' Netflix account. I don't know. Anyway, that's neither here nor there. But when I saw that, I was like, I don't trust it. And then I saw this like cuties thing going around, and I was like, why is everybody so upset about these oranges? Because, you know, I don't know if any of you have, you know, bought the cuties oranges, but we do here. I'm like, what do these oranges have to do with Netflix, and why is everybody mad about these oranges? These oranges are great. And then I, of course, did a little bit more digging and found out that Cuties was like a Netflix special. And as I thought about, like, why don't I trust it, right? Like there's virtue to us protecting children. Like there's virtue to that. Like I have no argument against that. There's certainly virtue to the notion and the idea that we as human beings would, like, and I talk about it all the time, that we would guard, safeguard, and protect those most vulnerable in society from being preyed on by powerful, rich, whatever else have you people, right? And so on the surface, it's like, yeah, of course, like that's a virtuous thing for people to be up in arms about the exploitation of children. But then as I dug deeper into the whole thing, And let me say this right here. I've not yet processed my whole opinion about cuties. And this video is not about cuties. It's just where I'm at right now as my brain's going. Like, I haven't processed everything that I believe about it. But what I do know and what I do believe about it is that behind a lot of this outrage that you see a lot of times from evangelicals, it's like if you look behind the curtain and you see who's operating the Wizard of Oz, is this European sense of cultural acceptability that permeates what could come across as otherwise like a morally pure, ethically lofty way of thinking and being. That like, this thing offends my sensibilities, so therefore it must be immoral, without necessarily actually interrogating the thing to see if the thing is in fact what you think it is. I will say at minimum, I read an article by Roger Ebert that I thought was really insightful about this, and put it on my Facebook yesterday. This idea that there's a difference between endorsing and depicting. And this leads me a little bit more to like what frustrates me about Christianity and evangelicals in general, certainly here in the United States, is like that there's a parsing sometimes, right? Like well, I'm okay with this thing that depicts really horrible, awful, ugly things, but I'm not okay with this thing that depicts and displays and shows and tells the story about awful, ugly things, because I don't know what the because is, but as an example, you can look throughout the First Testament of the Bible and even the Second Testament of the Bible, you can see things that are not ever condemned, like slavery. And we see stories told and admonishments given to slaves and slave owners, yet no one is talking about boycotting the Bible. Like, you see instances and stories told of forced surrogacy, of rape and murder and genocide. And those things are depicted throughout the Bible without there being, certainly right after these stories are told, you don't often see this like, and this was wrong, and people shouldn't behave this way. Yet somehow we have found throughout our history, certainly in America, in the United States and throughout the world, since the printing press and people have their own Bibles that they can read, we have found that people find that collection of books to be helpful and useful, despite the fact that there are things depicted in it that are really, really awful that people should not emulate. So again, without casting a vote for yes to cuties or no to cuties, I'm thinking to myself, I can't trust people who have not wrestled with and interrogated their own ideas and beliefs before they start casting aspersions and shade on other people's work and other cultures and other ways of thinking and other platforms. Again, let me be very clear. I do not believe children should be exploited. I believe we should protect our babies. I believe we should do everything we can to do so. But I also think that it's important that as we are doing it, that we are mindful of the way that we go about it, because we can go about it in ways that are every bit as harmful to society as people would claim that a show or movie or whatever depicting certain things that it's not endorsing or not intended to endorse. Like our like way of virtue signaling and propping up this like Euro normative way of thinking is every bit as oppressive, if not more. I hope that makes sense, because as I was saying it, I was like, my brain was this is one of those times where my brain is working faster than my mouth can keep up with. So please bear with me as I'm talking through this. And then there was, I'm going to move off the cuties thing and leave that behind. And if you got comments about that, you can put it in the comment section. We can dialogue about that, and y'all can dialogue with each other about that. In fact, let me make it very normalized for you. Like in the comment section, both on YouTube and Facebook, have at it. Have conversations with each other. Have conversations with me. I just ask if they're like good faith conversations, that there's not people in there going, well, I'm right about this, so you should just listen to me. I just think that's unhelpful. The other thing I saw earlier this week, that again, coming back to this, why I feel this sense of distrust when I see things from Christians, it makes me go, again, because I don't know that there's a lot of deep interrogation being done a lot when it comes to Christian ethics and morality. I saw this post that was encouraging people to vote biblically. I'm going to take a sip of water for this. Okay, hold on. It was an admonishment to vote biblically. And to be fair, there was a time in my life, as I've probably described to you guys before sort of deconstructing and decolonizing faith, that I would have thought, well, duh, of course you vote biblically. Because I grew up in a Christian tradition that by and large, and I'm not going to say entirely, but by and large, a Christian tradition that wasn't about interrogating or sifting through or turning the jewel, as the ancient Jews used to say. Like it was more, it wasn't about that. It wasn't about wrestling with the philosophical questions and figuring out how do we get these ancient writings to speak to our current situations. It was about memorization. It was about indoctrination. It was about listening to what someone has to say about what these words mean and accepting that is what they mean and trying my best to impose that on the rest of the world. That was probably too much of a reductionist way of describing it, but that's certainly, if someone would just ask me to just very briefly describe it, I'd say that's what it is. Memorization, indoctrinization, and sort of like trying to, and just accepting. You just accept what you heard. And so when I saw, before when I would have seen vote biblically, I'd have went, yeah, duh. But today, this week I saw it and was like, that's what my brain sort of like objecting to something sounds like. Let me show you again. I was like, like I just like had this like pause. It was like, hold on, man. That looks right on the surface. And I even come off probably as somewhat of an ass by even objecting to it. But if I could raise my hand and just say, hold on 1 second. Because I remember in 2016, I've said this before, because I'm talking all the time, so I never know where and how I actually said it. So if you've heard it before, just bear with me. I had many of my friends who were part of churches I was part of and religious groups and circles I was in back in 2016 decide that they didn't care if the presidential candidate was a proven racist. They didn't care if he grabbed women by the pussy. They didn't care if he was misogynist. They didn't care if he was a narcissist. They didn't care if he was going to build a wall that kept all dark-skinned people from coming into the country. They did not care, as he said in his own words, if he went out in the Central Park or wherever he said, not to mention the Central Park 5 situation they didn't care about. If he went out into the middle of Manhattan, pulled out a gun and shot and killed somebody, they did not care, as long as their candidate was a candidate who upheld biblical marriage, which I'll get to in a minute, and protected the unborn. Because through the lens of, because with a lack of interrogating our faith or beliefs through the lens of culture and community and gender and science and anthropology, all the answers are really simple, especially if you are white and cisgendered. all of the answers are really simple then. It's not like the whole vote biblically is really easy for you then, because there's really nothing that really excludes you culturally in that. But I want to, for a second, in front of all of us, present for us some interrogations of those two things, of the biblical marriage notion and the protection of the unborn. Because Christians will often will cite these ideas about the Bible and God created Adam and Eve and not Adam and Steve, or whatever whatever other things they say, and will cite biblical marriage to say that there is a way that the Bible tells us we should be married. And to that I will go, how? Is it the way that Solomon was married to like a bunch of different people? Is it the way that Abraham and Sarah were married, with a slave girl who could just be given to Abraham like it's Handmaid's Tale? Is that a biblical? Is that the biblical reference you're talking about? Is it Paul who writes in the Second Testament, the Christian Testament, of the Bible, who says it's better that you don't get married at all? Is it like the ceremonies or the way that the early influences of the Christian sexual ethic being in the early Testament, in the Torah of the Bible, where you see like the way women are exchanged as property? Like that if you got quote unquote damaged goods, being that you got if you were a man who got a woman who wasn't a virgin when you married them, then first off, there had to be proof of that. And you could come forward and say, hey, this marriage is null and void because she's not a virgin, meaning that the father would have to pay me pay my family, because the exchange, I got bad goods, in essence. Is that the kind of biblical marriage you're talking about? Like, so should we be voting for that? Is that what we're saying? But that's not really what any Christian talks about when they talk about biblical marriage. What they're actually talking about is heteronormative European acceptable marriage. They're not actually talking about what the Bible actually has in it when it comes to marriage, which, if we're being intellectually honest, is a lot of stuff. A whole lot of stuff. And again, to my point, as I said earlier, the Bible does, at no point throughout it does it condemn the fact that that people had multiple partners that they were married to. And it certainly doesn't condemn the treatment of Hagar by Abraham and Sarah, ever. You go check it, and if I'm wrong, put it in the comments. I mean, whatever. I don't think you're going to see that in the Bible there's this condemnation, but of course I understand that we're talking about interpretation and how we read things. Secondly, if we jump to what should be a lot more easy to talk about, more cut and dry, when we're talking about protecting the unborn, because the Bible is clear about, Jeremiah 29:11, I think that's the one. Before I formed you in the womb, I knew you. So it's very clear and obvious that like this scripture is God saying that life begins before I formed you in the womb. Hold that thought for a second. And that's a verse that oftentimes we'd see used to like justify the way people think about, about the unborn, because the Bible is very clear about it. Okay. Well, there's this law. I think I've talked about this before. I think it's in Leviticus. So it's in the Torah, which is the prescription of the way of life for the Jewish people, is the Torah, where there is you can see some trepidation, or you can see some question being asked, even in ancient times, about when is a baby a baby? When is a life a life? Because there's a difference made between this thing that happens. Let me just tell you what happens. Basically, it must have been that there was a fight where a pregnant woman got bumped and miscarried. And so they made a law that was, if that ever happens again, if the baby, and there's this is a really hard thing to like explain. I'm doing my best right now, but in essence, what the Torah says is if the baby's fully formed, then the man who bumped into the pregnant woman's stomach is to be killed. This is where the whole eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth comes from. It's like, this is like, because of if you kill, then you're killed. This is early primitive justice, that like you took a life, so now we're taking your life. And again, that's based on if the baby is fully formed. I don't know what they would say was fully formed, but this is what the Torah says. If the baby is not fully formed, then the man who bumped the pregnant woman in some fight, which is, again, I say this had to have been some random instance that they just wrote a law about. But if the baby is not fully formed, then the man has to pay a fine. So the distinction's made that there's a life for life. There comes a moment where the baby's fully formed, and there's a moment where the baby's not, according to the ancient writers of scripture, or the writing of this law, where they were like, there's a time where it's fully formed, and therefore life for life, eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth. Or there's a time where it's not fully formed and you just pay a fine. So that, along with the before I formed you in the womb, there's an inconsistency at minimum there that I think needs to be looked at and interrogated before we just say what a biblical worldview is about this particular instance. And we also know that throughout history, in the early church, in the first, second, third century, that women did not have the right to choose whether or not they wanted to have an abortion. If the man who they married, certainly in Greek culture, said, I don't want a baby, that woman had no choice. She had to go put that baby in a trash heap, in essence, outside the city gates. And this is where the whole idea of early Christians, one of the early Christian ethics was that they would go to these places where all these babies were abandoned, and Christians would go take those babies and take them in and adopt them. But we have had a moment in the history of the world where women could not choose for themselves, where men chose for them. And we know that kind of world seems oppressive and patriarchal. So if it is oppressive and patriarchal for men to force women to have abortions, I would ask, is it not also oppressive and patriarchal for men to write the laws about whether or not women can or can't? Just food for your thoughts. Again, I am not here advocating for anything. I'm just really what I'm trying to put forth is the kind of deep interrogation of belief systems that I feel are necessary for us if we're going to make the best possible decisions, like the ones we're going to have to make later this year. Like, if we're going to make those decisions well and think well about those things, and even thinking beyond just November 3rd about how we choose to arrange our society, if we're going to do that, I think we have to think rightly about our world and our lives, and about religion and science and politics and our communities. I think we have to make space for everyone to pull up to the table and add their voice to the conversation, regardless of their background or their religious belief, or I think more chairs should be brought to the conversation than just us going, there is this book that tells us exactly what we should do. And if we're being honest, the book doesn't. And first off, it's not a book. It's a collection of books. The word Bible literally means libraries. And I don't know why that so bothers me that people continue to refer to this as a book, but it does. It's in and of itself, when you start talking about it, we start talking about it wrong. It's not a book. It's a library of books, a collection of books over thousands of years. You know how much society changes over thousands of years? The United States of America is 245, 46 years old. Somebody correct me on that if I'm wrong. how much has this country changed? So I just think we got to think right. I think we have to be like intellectually honest. I think we have to be communal in how we think about the world around us. And as I said a few minutes ago, I think we got to be like, even when we start talking about the Bible, I think we should start talking about it correctly. I promised myself I wouldn't do this, but I'm going to do it now just to help to further drive this point home, because it feels like an important one that I just made about the Bible, the library, like how we start talking about the thing, how we start engaging in it. I've started taking golf lessons. I swore I wouldn't be that person who brought everything back to golf, but I can't help it. I started taking golf lessons, and I get very frustrated because I'll learn how to do something in golf that throws off something else in golf, and then I'm just infuriated. And I pray to God, if anybody's ever near a golf course that I'm on, just forgive me in advance for the stuff I say out loud. There. But I just watched a video today because I was having trouble. I watched a video that talked about how you start taking the club away from the ball will affects everything. And it's not the turn, it's not the impact that the club makes with the ball, it's how you start the thing. And I think how we start thinking about sacred text and religion is so important. And it's been off. And therefore our follow through is off, and how we choose to vote is off, and how we choose to arrange society is off, because we started off with a wrong way of thinking about something sacred. And I do believe that there are sacred texts from all kinds of religion. I am not a person who says we should do away with religion, that religion has no place in society. It has a great place. That maybe in a future Existential Sunday, I can talk about the position that religion holds in society that is super valuable. Super important. But how we start to think about that thing and how we start to think about sacred text is just so vitally important. And as we get ready to make another decision this year, November 3rd, I just think it's important we think rightly. That we just, and again, this rightly thinking is certainly something that I don't know that us as individuals we can arrive at. I think being a neighbor to somebody, I think being in a friendship with somebody changes everything. I think when the people over there become the people over here, we start to see issues differently. Because before there was just people over there and it was an issue that affected them and had nothing to do with me. And then when I allowed myself to get proximity to the people over there and they became the people over here, then I can start to go, oh, yeah. I see that thing differently now. Like I can still have very strong opinions about some, certain morals and certain overarching things, which is fine. No one's asking that you do away with what you feel or what you think, or that what you think or feel is invalid. But it's what I am saying is that people's feelings and experience should be factored in to how you see the world around you. Now, I know that in the 28 minutes that I've been talking, I meant to say this early on. Maybe I did, maybe I didn't, because I don't even remember what I said 28 minutes ago. I know in the 28 minutes that I've been talking, I've probably said some things that are potentially contradictory to stuff I said years ago, stuff I said before, stuff I even might have said during this particular live broadcast. That's called being human. And that's a part of the messiness of wrestling with this stuff. And that's one of the last things I'll say before I let you go, is that we need to normalize the messiness of wrestling with the complicated issues that face our society. And stop trying to cancel everything we don't like just because it's like it offends my sensibilities or it makes me uncomfortable. Like if my knee-jerk reaction is cancellation, that's a me issue. That's something going on in here that's causing me not to be able to sit with something that's different, it's messy, that's hard, that seems like different than the way I heard it, the way I learned it. I think in those moments when you come across something that puts you back on your heels like that, your best response is, before it's, oh my God, or clutching your pearls. Your first response should be, I wonder, I'm curious about. Because the moment we lose that I wonder and that curiosity, we stop being human. That's all I have for you guys today. If you are not a part of the Patreon community, that there at the bottom is my way of telling you that you should join the Patreon community. It's an important part of the work that I'm doing. The folks that are in there, talking to me, messaging me, as well as contributing financially to this work is important. And I want to offer you the chance to do that. So the link to that is in the comments of this video. And so you can click that link, or it's in the comments section. I don't know where it is. It's somewhere. But you can join that community today if you'd like. Grace and peace to all of you.